Okay. What was I saying? Today, are you recording? What was I saying? Today, are you recording?
Yep.
I'm recording.
Okay.
Can we just start?
Let's do it.
I'm a little out of it today. I'm both in it and out of it. Whatever it is, I'm both.
Okay. That works.
It's like one of those days that you get like halfway through before realizing you put your underwear on backwards, but you don't have the energy to fix it. So you're just like, I don't know. What can I learn here?
Does that mean you're wearing your underwear backwards?
It does.
That's uncomfortable.
But of course, me being me, I'm just like, I'm going to sit with this all day. Glean some kind of an insight from this experience. Don't let it go to waste. Do myself the disservice of just fixing it.
Oh, so funny.
That's not what we do here.
No.
Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing light workers get together every week for an hour to talk about, I think I say this different every time, to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can live as your true self and follow your true north. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby. Good morning. This is episode 24.
Episode 24.
Since we've changed our numbering system. Yeah, welcome. Episode 24. I have some big stuff to talk about today.
Go.
All right. So it first starts with a story.
Okay.
Which I don't share a lot of stories, so this will be fun. So I'm a runner, right? Mm-hmm. And I have been a runner my whole life. I picked up running because my hand-eye coordination is terrible, and I cannot really catch or throw balls well. So
you have running and swimming. And that's
yes, and I can't swim, so
running. So it's running. Okay.
It becomes running. Yeah, funny story about not being able to swim. Just very quick side note, when I moved to Camp Grady Spruce on Possum Kingdom Lake, I was a lifeguard. How that happened, who couldn't swim? Like I obviously could fake it enough to like pass the test, and I have physical endurance. And it was really more like at that point about being able to do, sadly, like sweeps for drowning victims and things like that. It was more about a rescue mission versus the swimming. But right. It cracks me up to this day that I was a lifeguard at one point. The person who cannot swim.
That is hysterical. I see you as being someone who could like muscle your way through figuring out how to swim if you absolutely had to.
That was pretty much it. Yeah, that was pretty much it. So, right. So I don't swim except that one small brief period in my life where I pretended
to be someone who could swim for those who couldn't on their own.
Yes. Yeah. And so, so I chose running. Like running doesn't require catching balls. And then I was good at it. But somewhere along the way, I learned this lesson of, it's really easy when you are running and or you're doing anything that requires a lot of physical stamina and you run out. You're up in your mind completely and you're like, I can't do this anymore. I can't go any further. I'm not going to be able to make it. My legs hurt. My lungs hurt. You can go through this whole host of things, and that's what's constantly going through your mind. And at some point, and I'm pretty sure this was in high school, I discovered that if I could get that out of the way, if I could get those thoughts, that mind kind of downward spiral out of the way, I would be able to dig deeper and find this reservoir of power within me that had really been there all along. I just wasn't accessing it because I was caught up in my own suffering. And I named it. I don't know why I named it this, but I guess because this happened so long ago, what came to mind was the word dig. And so if I found myself in a race and I was getting caught up in my mind to the point where it was affecting my performance, if I told myself to dig, I could shut everything off in my mind. I could shut off the crowd, the people, the other competitors, and it became just me to the point where I could dig deep enough within myself to find the physical power to finish the race strong. And I think that was one of the reasons that made me so good. Not just that I practiced my craft and had the physical stamina to do it, but I also feel like I was that full athlete where I was able to get out of my way mentally. So fast forward, and I have something going on with my throat. If I'm clearing my throat a lot lately, and I've realized, I put 2 and 2 together, that I'm going through a major change. Mm-hmm. Change happens in the 5th chakra, which is in the throat. And so I'm coughing and clearing my throat a lot. I will try to not do that on mic today, but I'm apparently downloading some change. See, excuse me. There it is. And so I'm supposed to touch my throat, my 5th chakra, and every time I clear my throat or cough, and say, I am willing to change.
All right.
So I won't do that through the whole episode, but if you see me, for those of you watching the video, touching my neck, that's what I'm doing. In my mind, I'm saying I'm willing to change. So fast forward, we recently took a trip out to West Texas and out to the Chinati Mountains for just kind of staycation getaway sort of thing. Staycation as in stay in Texas. Mm-hmm. And I missed a race out in West Texas back in April because it was canceled. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to get in a good trail run while I was there up in the Chinati Mountains. And so I haven't been running as much these days. I've been doing more biking. So I've kind of out of my trail running endurance. But I just said, I'm going for it. And I did. And I get out on this run. And of course, this is what happens. You know, it's like, feels like 120 degrees outside. Every pore is gushing sweat. It's getting in my face and my eyes. I'm hot. I'm at a higher elevation than what Denver sits at. So I was already like gasping for air. And really got up in my head, not just about what I was physically feeling, but about all the crap that I've been sitting in for the last few weeks, the darkness that I've kind of alluded to with you, with our tribe and here. And, you know, it was so bad that I got to the point where I'm just going to stop. This is ridiculous. I'm just going to turn around, go back. This is a failed attempt at trying to run. And then I remembered that I just needed to dig, that if I could dig, I could get out of my own way. So I was like, all right, you know, pep talking myself. Okay, Abby, you can do this. Just dig, you know, you're about to go up this big hill. It's not about doing it fast. It's not about doing it well. Doesn't even have to look pretty. Just get to the top of the hill and you can do it if you dig. And so I got out of my way and just really stepped back into my body to the point where I could do a body scan and physically feel that my legs did not really hurt. Like I had a lot of power in my legs. Didn't have the capacity in my lungs, but that was okay. I felt like my legs could carry me. And so I did. I got to the top, you know, and then on the downhill, I'm like starting to cry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I so emotional about running up a hill? That wasn't that fun. And then I realized that taking it outside the perspective of running, I have been fighting in my life the last few weeks, full on fighting and not digging. And what I realized on this run, my big aha moment, is that I need to teach others and practice this myself, how to dig. So I need to explain though the difference between digging and fighting, because I think once I explain it, I'll be interested to hear your perspective. Let me just share it and then you can tell me, you know, what you get out of it. So digging versus fighting. What exactly is fighting? Because that's where I feel like I've been sitting the last few weeks. Fighting takes a lot of energy. It's very high energy, but it's unsustainable energy. So when you're fighting, it activates that fight or flight nervous system. So it's meant to be short-lived. It's like that burst of adrenaline, and then the adrenaline doesn't last. You're supposed to use it and then get out. So it's not a sustainable energy when you're fighting. It feels very desperate, almost as if you are clinging and clawing, or like someone is holding on to your ankles, or you have shackles on your ankles. That's what fighting feels like. There's a shallowness in your breath where it's just, you don't have the capacity to really breathe deeper and open up your entire chest cavity. It's a very unstable nervous system response. It's surface level listening, which you've been talking a lot about being a better listener lately. And this kind of rolls into this idea of wholehearted listening that at some point I want to discuss with everybody. But when you are fighting, you are doing surface level listening, which is very defensive type listening, which makes you reactive. Fighting is very panic driven, fearful. You sit and worry and anxiety. And because you're sitting in a lot of those things, it's a very low vibrational frequency. Fighting is very much one-sided. It's sitting in everybody else's business. It feels exhausting, kind of like the anxiety making your heart flutter, like as if you've had too much caffeine. Mm-hmm. And then you're just very much out of touch. You're out of touch with your body. You're out of touch with nature, which is what kind of recalibrates all of our systems. It's that external locus of control where you're constantly finding everything from the outside to kind of validate or influence how you operate. And when you're fighting, you are very resistant. Like no change and no growth can happen when you're sitting in fight. And so I realized that that's what has been happening to me the last few weeks. And it's interesting because I often tell people, you're a fighter. You're very strong. You know how to fight. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's not at all what I want to say to you. That's not what I meant. But now that I've kind of distinguished the difference between fight and dig in my own head, I don't want to tell anybody anymore that they're not a fighter. I want them to be diggers. I want us to all be diggers. So when I'm digging, when I'm out there running, what I'm really accessing, and I love that it's digging because it's also another garden reference. But when I dig, I become very grounded and very rooted, and I have a heaviness in my body, but almost as if I'm sinking into that reservoir of strength. It's not a heaviness as if I'm being weighted down by shackles or someone pulling me down, but it's a heaviness as if I'm one with the earth, and but it's very powerful. It's not pulling. Digging is really about it's methodical and systematic, where there's something. In fact, you mentioned something about this recently within our tribe about how if it doesn't make you cry, dig deeper. And so that digging deeper is really about having that faith in the universe that there really is something there, that there is a reservoir of power, that if you just keep peeling away the layers, you just keep digging, you will be able to access it. And it's having that faith that it's there, that if you just keep doing the work, it is there. So digging is all about having will. It's having power. It's your core. It's unconditional. When you dig, there are absolutely no limits to anything that you can do. Everything is available and possible to you. You can run up that mountain even if you don't think that you have the strength. You can actually physically do it if you're digging. It's very much sitting in your own business. It's that heavy, deep, diaphragmatic breathing in your nose, out your mouth. And because of that, it creates kind of this sense of calm. And what I notice when I dig, I start to get this heat that penetrates my entire body. Like someone could come up to me and not even put their hands on me, but feel the heat radiating off of me. That's sort of what physically happens. And then it becomes eerily quiet. Like I said, where I could take away the crowd, the sound, I could take away the thoughts in my head. It's like if you've ever been, one of my favorite things in the whole entire world, but if you've ever been up in the mountains or in a forest or a heavily wooded area and it begins to snow, and there is this deafening silence that comes with it to the point where you can literally hear the snowflakes falling on the ground and nothing else. And any step of a deer, your breath, your own heartbeat, you can hear it all. There's like this clarity that just manifests when you start to dig because of this absence of sound, because it's like you're in your own bubble. When you're digging and you're interacting with other people, it's meeting them where they are versus that getting defensive about it. And you access it through actually spending time in nature or connecting with the house of your soul, which is your body, being able to just kind of come back in tune with who you are. It's wholehearted listening versus that shallow listening. And it's very responsive versus reactive when you're digging, because you kind of have, it's internally driven versus externally driven. Mm-hmm. And of course, because all of this activates your rest and digest, it certainly aligns more when you dig. It aligns with your true north self. So I just realized, like, my terminology all this time has been so wrong. I've been telling myself to dig all this time, but never really put it together outside of physically running, what that meant, because all of those things happen for me when I tell myself to dig. And typically when I do that in a race, I will PR almost every time. It's crazy. It's crazy how this happens. So I think I've discovered another piece to my healing modality. You're laughing. Are you laughing at me?
Before you said R, I thought you were saying that every time you do this during a race, you will pee. I was like, wow, you're really hoping. Every time I do this, I will, if I dig hard enough, I will pee during the race, and people will think it's just sweat. I will PR. I will, and personal record is what that stands for those who don't.
Yes.
Okay, you will. That's true. That's why I was trying to very quietly laugh to myself.
But I very well could pee. I drink a lot of coffee before a race, so. And I'm so stubborn, I will not quit to go to the bathroom. So
you're just saying it so confidently. Like, when I do this, I will pee.
I will pee. Mm-hmm.
R.
Yes. So I'm just so stoked, because I seriously think I've just uncovered this little gem that's rolling right into my healing modality about teaching people how to dig.
Mm-hmm. That is kind of the thing I'm noticing is happening a lot in your life and in my life and in our tribe. Like, we had a whole call 2 days ago about the power of words, and one of the things that came up was how you can describe a thing using different words, and then all of a sudden in your experience it becomes a whole different thing. Even though it's not a different thing, you experience it as something very different, which then can completely change and alter the trajectory of how you relate to it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what's happening here, right? Because like, what you're really describing is a struggle where you put in effort and it's difficult, right? And so the word that we normally have for that is fight. You have to fight for this.
Yes.
And so you're finding another word that also has the struggle and also has a thing that requires you to put forth effort. But you're right. It does. It's almost it's almost the exact opposite. Like, what was coming to mind while you were talking was that digging is inward towards yourself. When you think of fighting, you're always fighting against something or someone, and that someone or something is generally external, or it's not you.
Yep.
Right. And even like my wife was talking to me about a friend of ours who came very close to divorce, and the way that she described his inner struggle was that he fought himself for a year. And even there, you have two different parts of yourself that are at war with each other. So you're otherizing at least half of yourself at one point in time, at any given point in time, and it's whichever half you embody is the one that wins, but then you're denying the whole other half. Like, there's no integration there. So there's still, like, you're still fighting against something else. Whereas when you dig, it doesn't matter if there's anything external, because that's not even part of the equation. You're just going inward. And then if you think about something like you're running in a mountain, well, when you're fighting, your mindset is usually, I need to do that. Like, I need to get to the top. I need to get to the finish line. I need to finish the race. There's an external thing that you're trying to fight towards. But when you're digging, like when I used to do CrossFit, and I didn't use the word dig, but there always came a part where my body was like, I'm done. But the timer was still running, and I had to figure out how to keep going, right?
Yep.
And then what I did was, my focus wasn't on, I need to do that. It was, I need to do this. Like, what is this one lift that's right in front of me? I have this one deadlift I have to do. I'm just going to focus on this and forget about everything after that, right? So instead of focusing on the end goal, you're focusing on what you have to do right now when you're digging. And then, fighting is defensive. Even if you're the first person to throw a punch, you're throwing that punch because you're defending yourself against a verbal attack, an emotional attack. You feel attacked because of what somebody else brought to it. Every fight, both people are defensive, even if they're both seemingly on the offensive, right?
Yes.
But then digging is more explorative. There's no offense, there's no defense. You're just going inward, and it's endless. You can dig into yourself forever and never reach the bottom, right? And so, and it's funny because you said, I want to be a digger. And in my consciousness right now, I have a 2-year-old who loves construction equipment, and he calls them all diggers.
Diggers.
Right? And so when I think of the word digger, I'm thinking of something that's building something new.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting because you wouldn't normally pit digging against fighting and say those two things are opposites. But when you're talking about it within this context of you've reached your end, but you still have more to go, everything surrounding the idea of digging is completely 180 degrees antithetical to everything that comes in the territory of fighting. I like that a lot.
And I think, when people ask it, it can also answer the question that people have when there is so much uncertainty right now. At this point, like my best friend, she teaches school, and, yesterday they were teaching the first 6 weeks virtual, and today they're now just starting in the classroom. It's like everything is changing, and it's changing so quickly on a very large scale. And so, there's a lot of questions like, what do I do? Where do I start? And I think the answer truly is like dig. If we use the metaphor of gardening, you get your garden shovel out and you think about digging in the dirt. All you need to focus on is that one scoop. Just stick your scoop in, dig the first scoop. It's like the turtle step. What is the one thing that you can control in this very moment, however small it is? That's your scoop. That's your dig. Take one dig. Once that's accomplished, then you can focus on the next thing. It's like backing it up enough to see what you can do in this very moment instead of, like you said, trying to take the whole end game into play and getting overwhelmed by all of it.
Well, it brings you here and it brings you now. And
yes.
it takes everything else that's outside of you and outside of the present moment out of the equation completely.
Yes.
And, there was one other thing that I thought of twice, and both times I forgot because I started listening. I really don't like that I can't listen and think at the same time.
This is why I take notes sometimes.
I have notes. I just was so
yeah.
Also, if I'm taking notes, I'm also not listening. Digging. What was I gonna say? Oh, this was good too. Shit.
This is always my struggle with you because you always say such in depth, like that. You have many layers to what you say sometimes, and so
layers.
Oh.
Okay, so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but if I don't say it, I will forget it a third time, and then it will be gone. So when you fight, even if you win, it still costs you about as much as it would have cost you if you lost. You still have to fight.
Yes.
And oftentimes, if you win a fight, you put in more effort than if you lose.
Yes.
And so you still need to recoup after fighting, even if you win. Digging, one of the things that you said is when you dig, you uncover a whole nother, I hate that phrase, but a whole nother well of power that you didn't have access to until you dug to uncover it. And so whereas fighting, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, you still have to recover. Digging often gives you the thing that boosts you so that you don't even really, like, all of a sudden it creates ease. It's a struggle to get to that point, but once you get to that point, it actually gets easier to do the thing, which is why you PR every time.
Yes, because it's sustainable. Very much so.
Yes.
Digging is sustainable.
That was the thing that I almost forgot.
Okay, I love it. So that brings me to something else that we've been talking a lot about lately, which it's this good versus bad, good versus evil topic, dark versus light. And because we have, the fantastic interview from Kathleen Tucci just on episode 23, where she told us, which we knew this, we've been playing around with this idea for a while, that there really is no bad. There is not a darkness. It is all good. The universe is
only good. Yes.
The universe is only good. And so, this idea of digging flows nicely into that whole theory, because if you are digging, then there really is nothing to fight. There is no bad necessarily.
There's nothing to fight against. There's no against.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because what we perceive as darkness, what we perceive as evil, and I was even telling one of our tribe members this morning before I got on this call with you, is that, like, even this darkness of the Rona right now is actually a gift, but we're all seeing it as something bad, and we're seeing it as things that are being taken away from us. And truly, if you're digging, to me, I'm seeing it like it's finally coming into light that if I dig with this and everything that's happening, I don't want to say it that way. I was about to say everything that's happening to me, but everything that is affecting me by what's going on in the world, I am now seeing it as this is my opportunity to actually dig. And for me, what that might look like is I now have more time to write. I have more time to go inward and sit in my ritual, like Tucci was teaching us last week. And it's that more. It's like the universe is seriously trying to shake things up and get people to wake up. And we're seeing it as this bad thing that's happening to us. But if we dig into it and we believe in the idea that there is no bad out there, holy crap, can you imagine what could come out of that?
Right. Or the only thing that is things that we would classify as bad are things that we create.
Yeah, it goes back to...
So it's our choice whether or not we create it.
Yeah, that's suffering.
Do you want to unpack the good, evil, light, dark thing? Because that it kind of blew my mind and rocked my world a little bit.
Yes, I do.
I want to get it out there. Not to say that it's not already out there, but I had never really read or heard anything that kind of followed this train of thought, and so I thought it was an interesting thing to ponder and chew on. But so we have our tribe. We've had this ongoing conversation between a few of us about light and dark and good and evil, and the words that we use to describe that dichotomy of yin and yang. And it's interesting because people talk about yin and yang and then often circle back and talk about how like yin is not evil. It's just the opposite of good because good needs an opposite. And people talk about how you can't appreciate one without the other, but it's not even about appreciation or understanding. It's just about the fact that opposites exist and everything has a counterbalance. But that doesn't really satisfy, it's just, I don't know. It's yin and yang also are like catch-alls for everything that's opposites. Yeah. And so... we were playing around with the idea of what those are, and a lot of times we come down to dark and light. And I grew up Christian. I read a lot of Christian writers and thinkers and philosophers, and so there was this one dude, some people may recognize his name is St. Augustine, and he kind of dealt with the presence of evil, because he had the same question, like, if God is all good and everything stems from God, then where the hell did evil come from? And the answer that he kind of he worked for it, but it was just the idea that evil isn't a thing that exists and has substance. It's the name that we give to the absence of God or godness, right? So I think that's why we latch on to the idea of light and dark, because dark is the word that we give to the absence of light, but it's not a thing itself. Darkness can't bounce off of a mirror. You can't emit darkness. Right. And anytime light exists, darkness doesn't exist there. That's not even a fight. It's not a battle. It's not
Exactly.
So darkness is something you could argue doesn't actually exist in anything more than just a concept that we have created to understand what happens when light is gone. Or how cold doesn't really exist. It's just the absence of heat. In the same way, evil doesn't exist, quote unquote. It's just the absence of light, love, God, universe, whatever. But then the problem comes in when people do evil shit. Like, there's real evil in the world, and the things that we classify as evil are real things. So if evil is not a thing, then we need a word for when people fuck shit up, and so where does that fit into the equation? Because if someone does something that is truly evil against you, then it seems there's a disconnect if I sit here on my podcast and say, well, evil doesn't really exist. Well, then what the fuck was that? Where's the good in that? And I mean, you could argue that only happened because the light was absent in that person, that if the light was present in that person, then they wouldn't have done the thing, right? Which goes back to the argument that the only evil that exists is the evil that we create. But then if you go back to the idea of dark and light and cold and heat, the real difference there is presence and absence, right? Where light is present, there is no darkness. When heat is present, there is no cold. When light is absent, then you have the darkness, and when heat is absent, you have the cold. And when love is absent, you have evil. Evil is absence, love is presence. And then you talk about what does it look like to be a loving person, in any context where love has a place. As a husband, I'm a better husband when I'm present with my wife. As a father, I'm a better father when I'm present with my son. As a friend, I'm a better friend when I'm present. And even as a person, I'm better when I'm present with myself. Right? Which is where digging comes back into play, is you're practicing the art of being present with yourself.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of stumbling upon this another rewiring of words that we use to describe things. Instead of good, evil, light, dark, just presence and absence. And then being present is the closest we have to being or expressing the godness that we all carry inside us.
Yes. But I also think that we have to have, this is going to be funny, the presence of absence. I think we have to have that, because I think you need the dichotomy of, in order to know one, you have to know the other. But if we take, like, where I'm going with this is, another tribe member posted this really cool parable from the Cherokee about the two wolves. And this came to mind when you were talking about the people that do evil shit in the world. I immediately thought, well, of course, that's their evil wolf within them that's doing all the battling, right? They're completely out of balance. But so the parable, very quickly, is just that the Cherokee believe that there are two wolves inside of us. There is the good wolf and the evil wolf, exactly what we've been saying. And the good wolf is all love and light, and of course the evil wolf is always battling for your attention, but is the one that is the absence of love and light. And so it's not so much about, the whole parable goes, it's not about getting rid of the evil wolf. It's about feeding the evil wolf enough to find that peace within yourselves where the two wolves are not at war, because the evil, quote unquote evil, the dark wolf, actually has something to teach us. Like that's what gives us our courage, our fearlessness, our strength, our strong will, the tenacity. Whereas the white wolf then balances that up with the compassion, the caringness, the gentleness, the love and light, and the empathy. And so it's like, in order to dig, though, in order to be willing to dig, I need qualities from my dark wolf to keep going when it's really fucking hard. And so I think that's something else that, like, we need to start getting out there, is we just need to shift this perception. Like, this is not, I don't want to call this the evil wolf. And even another tribe member said, I don't like those words, good and evil wolf. And she was right. I don't either, because I don't see the wolf as a bad thing. I don't see the dark wolf as a bad thing. I see him as a teacher, but he needs to be balanced.
You just said something about the wolves that you said about something else on this podcast. You just described what we've talked about before as being the relationship between your soul mind and your ego mind.
Yes.
Like the good wolf is the soul.
Yep.
And then the bad wolf is the ego.
Yes.
And we've also talked about, I lose track of what was said on the podcast and what was said on the call. But I know we've talked about before how, under the assumption that your soul comes into this life with a very specific prescription of lessons it wants to learn here, your ego is is a collection of those lessons expressed through what they would look like if unlearned.
Yes.
And so when you're acting...
RTA.
Yeah, I don't know how I said that. Your ego is a collection of those lessons as expressed through what they would look like if they were unlearned. Is that close enough? Okay.
Yep.
So then when you're acting in ego, that is a signpost that this is your own actions exemplifying for you what you came here to learn, and it's an opportunity for you to choose to learn it. Right. And so, and we've talked about the Enneagram before, and people, and why we say we don't say I am my number, because at the end of the day, your ego is your number. Your ego, my ego is a 4. The personality that it made for itself. If you were to describe a 4, you're describing my ego, how it works, how it operates, what it wants, and what it's afraid of. Right. And if you say I'm a 4, then you're saying I am my ego, and your ego wants you to believe that it is you and you are it, but it's not. It's just one of the two wolves. And you get a choice whether or not you operate within ego or you operate within soul, right? And so one of the the conversation we had about the Enneagram was the whole point of the Enneagram is to pinpoint the lessons you need to learn to transcend the number that you identify as, so that you are an equal expression of all the numbers, right?
Yep.
So in the same way, you're disassociating from your number through understanding the lessons that number is here to teach you specifically. So when I catch myself being 4-ish, I know that that's an opportunity for me to transcend that and learn the lesson, because that's my ego being my ego. Whereas if I act like a 9, it doesn't really affect me, because I'm not here to learn the lessons that are presented to someone who would be a 9. And so you're right. The I'm just going to call them the ego wolf. The ego wolf is useful. It's a tool. It's there to teach you and to remind you.
Bad.
It's not
tool.
bad. It's just a tool, because without your ego, you're not really useful in society.
Well, how would you learn the lessons you need to learn? Like he's the one that she's the one that teaches you. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so then you have the quote unquote good wolf, which is the soul, which is the true self, the highest self, the one that, has all of its shit together. And like you said, you need both. You need balance, and they're both here to teach you.
Which is why I like to call it the light and the dark, or like using your terms, the presence and absence, because it takes away the fact that one is better than the other.
Right. It's a way to name the dichotomy without any type of moral indictment on one or the other.
Yes. And our goal is to find the balance.
Yeah, and the way to do that, here's the thing. Here I have so many words in my head right now. They're all fighting to be the first one to come out. Okay. Slow down. You've done this twice to me now, where it would come to my attention that there's something about me or how I behave or act or show up that needs to get fixed. One of which was talking too much. And then recently, you didn't know this, but one thing that I'm working on and working through is my propensity to just jump in without stopping to think about the thing first. And both of those are things that have come into my consciousness as things that I need to fix, that I need to work on, that I need to get better about, that I need to learn how to get under control. And both times you've pinpointed those specific things, and you were like, this is such a gift. Because you as an overthinker have a problem starting stuff. And then, so my just talking to you about how, I just decided I was going to do this. And then 3 days later, I've been doing it for 3 days, and here's what it is, right? Like,
exactly.
That's a gentle nudge for you to overthink things less. But at the same time, until you said that and painted it as a good thing, I only saw that as a negative trait that I needed to get under control, because I've been trying to edit this pilot for this TV series I got looped into for a while. And I realized on the tail end of this one stage of editing that if I had done things a little bit differently, I could have crunched that whole week's worth of work into like 4 hours. But I didn't stop to think about the best way to do it. I just jumped into the timeline and started cutting footage up. And so both of those cases, the overarching theme is it's not something that's wrong with you. It's not something you need to quote unquote fix. It's just something about you that you need to observe.
Yes.
Be the observer to the fact that you're like this, and then let that observation give you the insights that it will. And so when it comes to, are you being governed by the present wolf or the absent wolf, the soul wolf or the ego wolf? It's not a bad thing necessarily to be governed by those or living according to one or the other. It is a bad thing if you turn that into toxic behavior, but it's the behavior that's bad, right? If you're living according to the absent wolf, the dark wolf, as long as you're an observer to that and you can own the fact that you're operating an ego right now, that alone is going to be enough to give you everything you need to reroute if you have to. Without judgment, without indictment. It's just accept it as a fact of what is. And as long as you're a human being in a human body with a human brain, you're going to fall prey to the dark wolf. But
absolutely.
Don't judge yourself for that, or tell yourself you need to kill that wolf, or beat yourself up for going there.
Right.
Just be an observer to it and learn the lesson you came here to learn. And
well, and yes, and when you were talking about needing to fix those two things in your life, you were perceiving them as bad things that needed to go away. Made me think of like having another conversation recently about just not accepting where you are, you as in whoever you are, in that moment. Like, and so what I hear you say is that you just need to accept and be the observer of where you are, but not judge that it's in any way wrong.
Right.
Be the observer, learn from it, and move on. But that there is no fixing that needs to be done. There is no needing to be better. You are already good enough in this very moment. That doesn't mean we don't have work to do. That doesn't mean we need to dig a little bit deeper. But when we are digging, and digging is living in love and light. And it's not just meeting other people where they are. It is also meeting yourself where you are, and knowing that your dark wolf might be present and might be trying to show you something, but that's not a bad thing. Like sometimes people find this odd when I say this, but when they are like we have right now a tribe member that's very much in stage 1, where things are just sort of, you think of like the caterpillar and the chrysalis just going in, everything is just starting to melt down, falling apart, not having any clue of what to do next. And so many times I will say, you just stay there. You need to stay. And it's so our culture to just come in and like try to save them and pull them out of that darkness and make them better. But we're doing a disservice when we do that. And it's for this very thing that you just said, because if you can't sit in your darkness and just know that that's where you are and wait for that thing to just come along, because there will be something that comes along in your darkness that you are meant to learn. There's a reason you're going and sitting heavy on the darker side than you are on the lighter side. There's something to learn from it. And so if you can be in the darkness and you can keep remembering to dig, when you come back to the light, it will be, again, a gift. I say that a lot, but it will be this gift of something, because you were willing to stay there a little bit.
So what I'm hearing you say is, if you get halfway through the day and realize your underwear is on backwards.
Yes.
You know the rest. I don't need to waste any words on it. I just wanted to talk about underwear again.
Underwear being on backwards. Yes, absolutely. But so another tribe member, she put something up there. This one cracks me up. Love and hate are 2 horns on the same goat, which cracked me up. I'm sure that's some random Southern thing. Love and hate are 2 horns on the same goat.
I could just see some like old farm.
I know,
farm
right?
Like,
right.
With like a thick accent. Yeah.
But I'm like, that's the perfect freaking metaphor, because we are the goats. We are one, and we all have 2 horns. You can't just walk around with 1 horn. A goat has 2 horns. So both the light and the dark, the love and the hate, the good and the evil, all reside within us. They're not going away. So anyway, that's voila.
Voila. Voila.
Oh, I know. So
I really want to talk about the other thing that we came to talk about before we got distracted by all of these other things that we talked about.
Okay.
The time that I pissed you off.
Oh, the time that you pissed me off.
And by the time, I say that like it was years ago, but it was like Tuesday.
Oh, right. It was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. All right. So I have been fighting, as I mentioned. Basically, a couple of things happened in my world, and I heard this term the other day, but broken by change. I felt like I came to this place where I was broken by change. My tools, everything I had was not enough to kind of pull me out of that space. And so I was in my darkness, and I was perceiving it as bad. And when I do that, because of some old hardwired conditioning from abuse and neglect and things like that from childhood, the way that I felt I needed to stay safe or be safe is to push everybody away, because nobody can hurt me if I'm on my own. And so I haven't been to one of these places in a very, very long time. And I got to this place and I was feeding it with more negative self-talk. I was feeding it with externally negative things that I was reading in the news, negative people that I was listening to, and it was just feeding this dark wolf, so to speak. So anyway, of course, one of those people I pushed away, because it's always the people closest to me, was you, and sort of just started stepping back and backing out, and you noticed that, and I'm making this a very short story as much as I can. And you came back to me and said, I realize maybe I haven't been supporting you enough, and said a variety of other things. And I got really mad at you for that. I got pissed off because my dark wolf was interpreting your words to mean something else, because him and I were running together. The dark wolf and I were running together at that time. And so when you said that to me, all I could hear was his version of the story, which was that Abby needs help. Abby can't do this by herself. Abby needs rescued. Like, I heard all these things that just made me very angry. Even though that was not your intention. And so that's when I immediately go into fight. That was that fight mode. I start fighting, but I didn't say anything. I just kind of shut down, because I also knew that, at least I know I have enough tools to know that I was being reactive and I needed to go sit with it a while. So I didn't say anything, just kind of went inward, and I left our conversation, and I sat with the anger for a while, and I allowed myself to be angry. So again, that was me sitting in my darkness. But I knew that the anger was a cover-up for something else. As anger always is. It's just an emotion that you use to mask something else. So if I stripped away the anger, I asked myself, okay, if I take away the anger, what am I really? And hurt came up, shame came up, a couple of other emotions. And so I was able to just kind of keep digging, pulling back the layers, and really figuring out, by staying in my business, try to figure out why your words triggered me that way. And that's when, well, what was your original question? Why am I talking about all this?
Because I asked you to just start talking about it. When we were going through this, I was reflecting on my experience of this whole thing with a trusted friend of mine who was basically like, this would be great to talk about on the podcast. But in the moment, it was very much like, we're talking about it post talk because it all kind of happened and resolved itself, and now it's all neatly tied up with a pretty bow. But I say that a lot. I said that in my interview with Kathleen. You tied that up with a pretty little bow. I don't know where that came from. But in the middle of it, I was like, Abby gives so much to this, and she's worth so much, and we need her, and this isn't what it is without her, even if she doesn't say a damn thing on these calls. And I was like, I was all heated and stuff, because you were like, I'm out. I'm not doing the tribe anymore. The True North is all yours. I'm not going to do it anymore. I don't contribute anything, and it's all within your skill set, and it's not within mine. And I was like, those are all just, I don't know where she heard them, but they're lies. And I was just, I didn't really like emote as aggressively to you as I was feeling on the inside, because I was like, Abby needs compassion, and she needs me to meet her where she is and be a safe place, which we still need to come back to that at some point and talk about being a safe place. But on the inside, I was like, I don't know why she's believing all this bullshit, but it's all bullshit, and everything she says is bullshit. And I'm just like, that's why I called you in the middle of you talking, and then I knew you weren't going to answer, and I called you again, and you didn't answer again. I was like, I know you have your fucking phone in your hand because I just cut you off from leaving me a voicemail. We need to get this shit ironed out. I was, and that's why I used my own healing modality that I figured out a week ago on myself to realize it was a lack of support. But my first story was that I was like, I'm feeling this way because I don't feel like she's supporting me because she wants to leave. And then I realized, oh no, that's not what it is. I don't feel, because you even asked me, like, do you feel the need to be supported? I was like, no. I don't care. I could, that's my own arrogance coming out. But then I realized that it was that I wasn't supporting you and not even just like as a partner in all of this, but as a friend, you know? And I don't even know if I told you this, but like I was listening to a podcast when you voxed me about 2 people who started a podcast, and then the conversation had just gotten to how they were friends first, and they had to be intentional about continuing to cultivate that friendship in spite of the fact that they had now become, you know, business partners. And then you start voxing and you're like, I'm out. It's all you. I'm like, oh, that's really good timing. And so, you know, it was, I don't know. It was a lot. Like it's funny because if you think about the actual words that you and I exchanged, you left a vox, we had a conversation, we had another conversation, and then it was over. But there was so much happening inside there and so much happening inside here that I don't know. I really wanted to talk about it last week because I wanted to capture it. I was like, this is gold. Like, we're both in the middle of this, and you're mad at me, and I'm scared, and like, we need to like hash it out on the podcast in front of everybody. But
it's interesting. If we would have left it, we were both reactive, which that's what happens. But when you have when you can have enough balance and be able to be the observer where you can step back from it, then you can switch it to become responsive. And I think that's what we've both done. And that's why we're kind of at peace with it now, is we've both showed up seeing the other person's perspective, where they're coming from, and not judging that in any way. And then providing the empathy, which you say you don't have, which I don't believe.
I am so over that. I've been told by everybody who knows me well that I'm a raging empath, and I feel everything that everybody else feels, and it's just how life is. So
awesome.
I'm on board. I've been convinced. Yeah. Whatever. Fine.
But the point, I mean, I think for people, for listeners, is how drastically different the story can really be if you stop. If you dig past being reactive. Like if I literally would have stopped at being pissed off at you because of my own warped interpretation of what you were trying to say to me, then we would not be here, right? We could have ended a relationship. We could have ended a business, ended a friendship. And I think that's a key, that what have you lost because you haven't chosen to dig past the initial reaction. You haven't chosen to dig past the anger, because the anger is always a front for something else that's most likely always your business. And we've talked about that on the podcast before, where, when we're triggered by somebody else, like when we are in full fight and we're being triggered and we're on the defensive, we don't have to be triggered if we know where that's coming from.
Right.
That it's really not that person attacking us. It's actually us attacking ourselves by interpreting the other person's words.
Right. It's more like an allergy.
With a dark wolf.
It's just like an emotional immune response to something that's really not a threat.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, that's a good way to put it. An allergy.
An emotional allergy.
An emotional allergy. An immune
But then
response.
the other practice for me was like we were on Zoom, and I think it was when you just started crying that I was like, oh, she's really mad at me about this. But then I didn't stop. Like I was like, no, this is the truth. I feel like I need to speak. And so I just kept on going and ignored it.
Yeah.
And I remember like being really conflicted about that. Like, Ryan, you need to change your tune. Ryan, you need to backtrack. Ryan, you need to apologize. But I was like, no, this is something that I feel like I need to say. It needs to be heard, and this is how to say it. And I just continue. I just went through it. And that was such a strange experience for me, because I was raised to be such a people pleaser and raised so much to like not rock the boat, not make waves, that it both made me feel empowered, like I'm finally learning the lesson of actually speaking the truth and being in my own business, and like we said in the very first episode, respectfully not giving a shit.
Yep.
And then it also made me feel like the biggest asshole in the world. Like both of those were there.
Yes.
And I'm learning that, and we even talked about this earlier this week, how sometimes in order to do what you feel like you need to do, you're also just going to have to deal with the fact that you feel like an asshole for doing it. It doesn't make you an asshole. That just means your ego and all of your defenses are fired up to try to keep you safe from what you think might happen if someone thinks you're an asshole. Mm-hmm. So then you convince yourself an asshole to talk yourself out of doing the thing.
Yep.
And that's all just part of it. And I'm very averse to people thinking I'm an asshole.
So I've been thinking about this because there's a few people in my world that are feeling like assholes, lately because of their actions. And so I kept thinking, like, what is the antidote to this? And something I kind of stumbled across is like when you're in that moment and you're feeling like an asshole, I wonder if you start experimenting with tapping into your heart chakra, because like our heart has this whole entire, like physiologically, we have a bundle of nerves that's in our heart that's actually pretty big. And the heart actually sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart.
Right.
And when we're sitting in, I'm an asshole, you are sitting up in the brain. You in that ego mind that we talk about a lot versus the soul mind. So the soul mind resides in the heart. That's where our soul lives. If we want to put a physical counterpart to it, it is our actual heart. And so when you're on the right track and you tap into your heart, you should be able, even though the words are really hard to hear. So you're saying you're an asshole because what you were doing or saying is really hard for the recipient. But if you tap into your heart when you are saying or doing those things, if that heart is opening, regardless of how difficult those words are, then you are fully aligning with that soul self. You are fully aligning with what is in the highest good of the other person. Because like, have you ever noticed when like somebody is lying to you? Like, and a lot of that's happening right now with all the misinformation that we're getting about the state of the world. If you're getting misinformation or somebody's trying to manipulate you in some way, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to run away. You don't want to be near it. It's like you want to shut it down. And so you shut it down by leaving the scene, changing the subject, getting defensive back, whatever it is. And so that is your heart closing up and trying to keep you safe. And so that's why I'm thinking, like, if you're in asshole mode, if you tapped into your heart and it was opening and you weren't physically feeling the need to run away, like leave the room or talk about something else, then you're probably on the right track. And it's no longer about being an asshole, because now asshole is a bad thing that needs to be fixed. And that's not necessarily true.
It's information. Like, there are times that I actually legit am just an asshole, and I can feel it. Like, you can hear it in my tone. You can see it on my face. And it's like, I'll just like fire back with something as soon as you're done talking, instead of processing what you said or even listening to what you said. And it's all defensive. And to me, when I get in that mode, that's good information to realize that I am on the defense because I feel attacked. Yep. And so in what ways am I being attacked, or am I just feeling attacked? And is there a difference? And so when I'm actually being an asshole, it's good. That's a good prompt for me to like stop and breathe and sort it out. But then other times I think, like, I assume that I'm being an asshole and I make myself feel that way, even when I'm not. And I think what's happening there is I'm making the assumption, however educated or uneducated it is, that the other person's going to experience me as being an asshole for doing what I'm doing or saying what I'm saying. And so it's like, I just preemptively agree with them, because if they tell me I'm an asshole and I fight it, I'm going to lose, because I lose arguments because people come at me with facts and I don't have facts. I just have feelings and stuff. So I always lose that argument, and the only way to end it is to give them what they want and just accept that I'm an asshole and apologize and move on. And so a lot of times, if I feel like there's a chance that what I'm doing might elicit that reaction, I just jump to the end of the argument and just start adopting the story that I'm just being an asshole. And that
sounds like fighting.
Yes, and that's what I am working on not doing. Which is why when I came to you with the insights I got and the my thoughts on your Vox, and it was very clear that you weren't responding well, I immediately started thinking, "Oh, you're an asshole now. You're just a big ol' asshole."
The story you tell yourself.
Right. This is the most times we've ever said asshole in a single podcast.
So true.
But then it was a growth moment for me to stop and say, no, Ryan, you're not. Like, you're still coming at this with love and compassion. You're still coming at this with empathy. You're coming at this with the right heart. And what you're saying is something that needs to be said. And that was just something I'm not very much in the habit of doing. So I have gratitude for you for giving me that opportunity to to dig through my own feelings of assholeness and realize that that's an old habit that needs to die. That now I have a victory story of it dying a little bit.
Yes, but I also think it's partly because you're telling yourself a different story. You know, you're no longer labeling it bad as I'm being an asshole. You're labeling it as you digging and staying within your truth and your love and light.
And connecting with my heart center. Like, I didn't actively, dig into where that chakra resides in my body, but I definitely was reminding myself, you are saying this in love.
Yes.
If she's not taking it well, that's her choice to not take it well.
So you basically just described what kind of a new concept I'm kind of working on about listening wholeheartedly, being a wholehearted listener.
Yes.
And I want to point this out to you because you have been struggling with thinking that your listening needs to be better. And I keep trying to tell you that no, it doesn't. So here's some evidence that you wholeheartedly listened to what I was saying to you. So there's like 4 levels to that. The first level of listening is like physically with your ear. The words come in and then your ego mind interprets them. That's when we become reactive, if we stop there. So the very thing we said where all of a sudden you start doing the self-talk of I'm an asshole or Abby can't do this, she can't leave, blah, 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 blah. And I immediately got defensive. If we stopped there, then all we've done is just ear listen. And it's just kind of, it basically creates conflict. So when you are in an argument or you in a fight, so to speak, with somebody, if all you're doing is ear listening, then you are definitely not wholehearted listening. And all you're going to do is just banter back and forth and trigger each other. Mm-hmm. So once you get past that, then if you really dig into listening, first you hear it, your ego mind will start to interpret it. But then if you can move into your body and you can breathe and kind of do this body scan and listen with your body versus just with your hearing, your sense of hearing. If you're listening with your body, then that's where empathy really begins. That's like where you can really start to meet the other person where they are. And that's what you did for me, is you heard me say one thing, you listened not just with your ears through the box, but you also listened with your body in a way that you were hearing my emotion behind what I was saying. You could pick apart and read between the lines what was really going on. Not that I just wanted to give up and stop doing True North altogether. You knew there was something deeper to it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then the next level of listening, if you're wholeheartedly listening, is with your heart. That's exactly just kind of, we already just touched on that piece about being able to tap into your heart center. And if it feels like you want to run away, then something's amiss. But if the person that is attacking you, if you can listen with your heart, so you listening to me, you also listened with your heart because you only saw what I was saying as love. You didn't want to run away from it. You chose to actually stay and speak your truth from your experience and your perspective. And then the last thing you do in wholehearted listening is with your soul. And that's where you're really staying in your own business enough, and you are treating me as an equal enough to say your truth, but then know that your truth also has validation for me. And so there is evidence that you listen beyond surface listening. And I'm not saying that that's how you operate all the time. I don't operate that way all the time. I'm not wholeheartedly listening all the time. I do a lot of surface listening, a lot of just ear listening. But if you can listen with your ear and then allow it to go into your body and then into your heart and then your soul, your entire True North person, then there's no more conflict, right? You can see somebody else where they're coming from. You can sort of dig through the layers of what's triggering you to see how they're showing up. So that's sort of my project I'm working on now, is how to start becoming a wholehearted listener, like going past just hearing the words and my ego mind interpreting them. And you just validated the fact that that's what you did for me. And so it is possible.
It's 11:11. Okay, so let me recap this. Ear listening is the words they say. Like as though you're reading something in a book, detached. Body listening is the emotion or the thing behind the thing that's motivating the thing that they say, or the thing that maybe they're saying without saying.
It's like the hysterectomy, right?
Yes.
Imagining the other person has a hysterectomy is body listening.
Or like when you were saying, you were talking about my output in the tribe versus your output. And what I was hearing you say underneath that was that you have a certain style of building up to output that there's not really room for in our current structure. Mm-hmm. And then heart listening is a kind of like adopting what they're saying, like almost assume it's true long enough to try it on for size and see how it fits, meeting them where they are instead of scrutinizing it compared to where you are.
Yes.
And then soul listening is seeing them as they are, as a soul, and seeing them in love.
And that you're both on the same journey learning a lesson as an equal.
And then when you can do all that, then you... honestly, also, that takes time. Like, you can't... It's almost impossible to be reactive when you do all four of those. So then once you've gotten through all those layers, the only option, if you're going to respond, is to be, responsive.
And I think... yes, I agree. And that doesn't always happen. Like you describe very much. There are times when I'm just an asshole, when you see it on my face, the words I say, but you can then take that experience, run it through the wholehearted listening, like process it, really contemplate, go through, and then come back to that person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, it's not like, I have to chalk that one up as I, just surface listening and left it at that. Like it may be that you actually process through this type of listening after the conflict, but the important point is to come back.
Yes.
To follow up.
And to bring it all full circle, a good practice to cultivate, to build these skills is just being present. Because what we're describing is what happens when you're both present with the other person and present with yourself. Which is why it's so easy for it to be done in love. Because I'm starting to really believe that love and presence are two words for the same thing, two sides of the same coin.
Yep. And there's your lightness, your light wolf.
There it is. Okay, so what are you grateful for?
Oh my goodness. There is so much. There's so much. I am really grateful for the time that I was able to spend out in West Texas. I seriously needed to... My goal for going out there was to completely unplug from my phone. I didn't even take my computer. I wasn't going to check on anything. Yep. And fully immerse myself in the West Texas mountains. And I did. And it's exactly what I needed to kind of shed light on... shed light.
There it is.
Shed light on the darkness I was in to help pull me out. So I'm grateful that we made the time to do that.
I'm glad you did too. Yeah. Deafening silence is a phrase from this episode that it's going to stay with me for a while.
Yes.
I am grateful. This is so crazy. There is okay. I went to go see Kathleen Tucci before our interview because I wanted to know who I was talking to and I wanted to know what it was all about. And a lot of things that have been kind of floating around my life, and like, do you know what a tag cloud is?
No.
It's a I think people do on websites where they just like take a document and then they make like a conglomeration of words that kind of show, like it's the thumbnail for the Tucci retreat that we have on our page, that graphic of all the words. Anyway, so it was like a cloud of a bunch of words.
Got it.
And I went to go see her, and then they all kind of like snapped in place, and I realized that they were all different words in the same sentence. and it all kind of like the thing that started me as a healer, the very first time I felt energy coming out through my hands was me asking the question into the ether, what am I here to do? That question was definitively, concisely answered. And it is now crystal clear to me. And I've been, my daily ritual has fed into some things that I've learned to that end. I've asked some questions I never thought to ask. I've gotten an answer that I didn't even realize was an answer to a question I didn't even realize I was asking after maybe a week of this regimented, ritualized practice that she talked about in our interview last week. Mm-hmm. And I'm already like on my way. I'm already on a journey that I feel like I was always here to take, but had never really even known where to start. And I know where to fucking start. And I'm already like a few steps in, It changes everything. It really changes. I feel like I'm using really big language right now, and I tend to like talk in hyperbole and use a lot of superlative terminology, and that's just kind of like the language I speak. But I'm dead serious right now. The last maybe 5 to 7 days, everything has changed. My therapist was like, "I have never seen you this lit up." She used the phrase "lit up." And wow. I've gotten that feedback from you. I've gotten that feedback from almost everybody in our tribe that I've talked to. And it's like, it's changed. Like things continue to snap into place, and things are starting to make sense where I'll just be, like I said, I was just outside picking up my dog's poop, and all of a sudden a bunch of pieces that were just kind of hanging out, all just like snapped into place. And all of a sudden I had a very clear recipe for something that I need to do that will take me to another thing, And that's just kind of, it's like when I do songwriting, the phrase I use is I just watch the song write itself. And now even that makes sense to me, because that is how generativity manifests itself through me. All the pieces are there for no reason, and then one day they all just coalesce, and then there's a thing that wasn't there before. And that's happening so rapidly and so intensely. I am so grateful that I'm finally on that journey, because I feel like it's one of those things where I've always kind of like wanted to, but it's so freaking weird and scary and unpredictable. But I'm there. I'm in it now. I'm in it. And so I'm just really grateful that all the things that happened, that needed to happen for me to get here, have happened, and I am here.
Yes.
And I'm being very vague. I'm not talking about it because I feel like I don't even know how at this point. Like
you're still refining, but the point is you are on the journey. You are on the road heading that direction.
But like I could monopolize all of next week's podcast recording and just talk the entire time about all of the things, and it would just be a preamble.
Yeah.
Like
right?
I can't. It's so much and so little at the same time. I don't know. It's. Yes, so I'm just really.
I can hear it. I can hear it. Yeah. Yep.
So I'm sure I'll talk about it at some point. A lot of the words that we have in our communal lexicon as a society to describe some of this stuff is also very polarizing and often triggering for people with different belief systems. So I'm really hesitant to even really. I don't know. I need to find other language for it, but it's there and it's happening and it's real and it's
exciting.
A long time coming and exciting, and it's going to change everything, but also change nothing because it was always supposed to happen this way.
Yeah. So true.
Woohoo! All right, well.
Until next time.
Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.